in 2015, and we're back with week 5. I'm going to pick up where we left off with a focus on an area that I don't even know if you describe it as an area of challenge for agents and brokers as much as it is an area of an unwillingness to give up control. In other words, the challenge is, and the theme for today is this whole insources versus outsourcing. It's the unwillingness to let go is really the theme that's going to pervade our discussion. And a lot of it comes from, for many agents, I think, a experience in their business where whether they've always done it all themselves or they've witnessed that other agents and people that they're inadvertently emulating have always done everything themselves. But if you look at this from a business standpoint, in other words, let's get out of real estate for a second. This is, whether it's insourcing or outsourcing, in other words, how do I stay focused on my key tasks, the number one thing that I see people off track with. In other words, we have a discussion about business development on a coaching call, and the discussion always is on this topic. I don't have time, I've got family obligations, and because I'm busy doing X, Y, and Z, I really couldn't even figure out how I would do 3 hours of business development, let alone 10 or 12 or 15. So if that's your mantra, and you're shaking your head yes, and you're seeing that that's part of what your challenge is, you need to be thinking today about, okay, am I just a control freak and won't let this stuff go because I'm a perfectionist? Anything you want to add to that before we get into the topic, Stevie?
No, this seems to be the only industry that relies on all the shiny objects and everything else to create business. And the truth is, we have to be creating our own business. We have to be in charge of, as the rainmaker and as the CEO for your company, I'm just going to bottom line it, 10 hours of business development a week. And if you don't want to do it, then get out of real estate, because nobody's going to do it for you. I mean, everything what I say about CRMs, it'll do all the work for you. No, it won't. Can you hear the tone of my voice? So, and I want to hire the cheapest person possible, probably from Pakistan, for $4 an hour to do this work for me, which is, okay, that's a solution for you, but not business development, period. That's what I had to add this morning. Good morning.
Challenge where, in general, if you're thinking that you want to be the outsourced, cheapest I can do it, you're probably not doing business development, because there are a whole set of agents and brokers in every market that are, in fact, paying good money, whether they've brought in-house an assistant or a key hire, or they've got a number of contractors that they've outsourced it to. And they can afford to get off of their plate in their personal world as well as the business world all of the items they shouldn't be doing. So here's the net on this, and we'll get into this today, but here's the deal. If you dig your heels in on this, you're always going to struggle with ups and downs. You're going to have business that'll start and will stop. You're always going to be telling yourself, I've got a good excuse for why I didn't do what I need to do in terms of business development, because you're doing $8 an hour work, or you're doing $300 a transaction work, and we'll talk about this in specific today. Second thing we're going to cover today is a little bit of homework, preparing for 2016 business planning. Steph's going to talk about a couple of things that are coming up for the remainder of the year and some options for some additional sort of fairly intense business planning conversations with the coaching team if you're interested in that. So stay tuned on that. Let's talk about outsourcing versus insourcing. So the first thing that people struggle with is, do I just hire somebody? You know, the whole insourcing versus outsourcing. The big issue here, and this is something we want you to be thinking about, is if you don't have the aptitude and experience to recruit, train, mentor, and lead by example a staff, you probably are going to be better suited to put contracting in place and outsourcing. Whether that meets with your personality style and you are scared to death of having people make mistakes and be outside of your office control, where you can sit there and manage them, and micromanage in some of your cases, you need to get comfortable with that. In other words, one of the things that I see, and I know that Steph will probably have some examples of this, is people will say something like the following. I tried to go outsource contract to close. I hired somebody. They made a couple of mistakes, so I took it back. Well, what you're saying is you're only worth $300 a transaction, because that 10 hours a transaction or 12 hours a transaction that you could outsource for $300 or $400 is only worth $400 to you, and you want to save that $400 versus the 10 hours or 12 hours of time. Now multiply that by several transactions, and what you're doing is the same way we tell a seller, if you're unwilling to lower your price, you're essentially buying your house back versus what the market will bear for it. Well, what you're saying here is you're only willing to pay to earn $400 in terms of your time, and you're okay with that. And it's interesting because there is a direct correlation to people who have inconsistent production and them being control freaks about contract to close or listing setup. And one of the things that I was very adamant about, and some of this comes from the fact that I come from Silicon Valley and we had no choice but to hire staff. Sometimes we use contractors. And I used to be a big proponent of you need to lead by example. You need to be able to show them what you want to do, not just say, go do this. And this is where agents struggle, especially the control freaks. They don't realize that people are going to make mistakes. When we brought in contract to close and we used contractors on our team in St. Louis, I remember several times that the contractor, and she was not nearly as experienced transactionally as Stephanie or myself or even a lot of other agents. And once she made a couple of mistakes, I sat down and I worked with her on how to learn from the mistakes, how to not have that happen again, and how to have it be something where we're continuously improving. The challenge is, for many agents, they're not willing to do that. It's, oh my God, this contract to close person made a mistake, and I'm not going to ever let them have a transaction again because God forbid there's a mistake made. You get accolades from your past clients and your current clients based on how issues are handled, not whether mistakes are made or not made. In many cases, they're not even going to realize what it is, and you may have a system issue, you may have something you want to talk with us on the coaching staff about that help you improve your process. We got so good at this from an outsourcing standpoint that on a pending transaction basis, in 1 year, I think we put 98 contracts in place. We had 2 not close. 2 in a difficult market. You remember how crappy financing was after the market reset. It didn't matter. You can't blame this on TRID. You can't blame this on other things. We were so proactive on how to solve problems and get transactions to the finish line without having to be in the middle of it, that it was easy for us to have contractors. We eventually got to the point where we brought somebody in-house. We owned an independent brokerage, and it became necessary to move somebody from a contract position to a full-time staff position just because of the volume. Most agents and teams, unless you're a very high-volume team, can work with contractors fine. You may choose to have a single hire, but back to this first point, what you want to realize is if you don't have the ability to self-recruit, to train, and effectively manage the staff, you may have challenges. You're going to have turnover. Your control freak behavior may drive people away. Not letting them learn and make mistakes and realizing they're going to be able to make mistakes and learn from them. It's not the end of the world. Now, if somebody's got ethics issues or complete skill level, you need to go back to your hiring process, both for contractors as well as in-house. Anything you want to add to that before we get into the next couple bullets?
No, I just want to kind of, on top of what you said, people, we learn from our mistakes. Every time we make a, holy crap, I got nothing pending for October, well, what did you learn from this? Well, I didn't follow up with my investment portfolio. I lost 3 people, or 2 of my pendings went sideways. The reason those things happen is because you're not doing your due diligence for lead generation. This is all back on you all. And I just want to say it again. We learn from our mistakes. I hope you're learning something from your mistakes. I hope you're learning that when you hired inside sales but you didn't hold them accountable, that's on you. I hope you learned when I don't have my next 5, that's on you. That's on you. So the mistakes are God's gift to us. So embrace them. I'm going to try to put a good spin on it. Good for you. You made some mistakes. Good for you. That's the only way we learned. So I'll let you go with that, Kevin.
Well, and you're going to make mistakes.
Yep.
Like going out on a listing appointment and realizing you didn't pre-qualify it very well. Now, why do agents struggle with the whole, we touched on one topic, which is the control freak. I'd rather do this because I'm better at it, I'm faster at it, etc. The big challenge, and just to tie down what you just said, of the, oh, wow, I've got nothing pending, or, oh, wow, I've got no active listings, is something you're telling yourself in the back of your head, and it's a tape you're playing every day that's giving you a pass on the boring, mundane tasks. It's not really going to kill anybody. My wife or husband's not going to notice that I really didn't do what I was supposed to be doing today. First of all, it's because there's no, as we talked about before in the real world, like in high tech and startups, there's no boss that's looking at you going, well, you really didn't do anything today or this week. Now you wake up 90 days later, and here's your challenge. You've got nothing pending, and you've got nothing active, or vice, or both, because you spent the preceding 90 days screwing off.
Yeah. You
told yourself every morning, I'm doing something important that you did instead of the boring, mundane tasks. And why is this in here under insourcing or outsourcing? If your excuse follows on from that to, I'm so busy doing X, Y, and Z, and it's worth $300 a transaction, or it's worth this, you got to get rid of that and get back on the boring tasks. Business development. If you watched what a top Edward Jones person does, they do exactly what you're supposed to be doing. They're out door knocking. They're out meeting with people. They're conducting face-to-face conversations or phone conversations all day long. They might talk to 100 people in a day, and we have a hard time getting people to do that in a week.
Yeah.
And you sit back and go, wow, that Edward Jones guy has a business where he makes like $1 million a year. Yeah, well, he acts like it. He actually goes to work every day. Now, in their model, when they put you through training, if you're unwilling to do the tasks, they kick you to the curb. Unfortunately, again, in real estate, there's nobody doing that. So if you ever wake up and you're like, I'm unhappy with the way my pipeline looks. I'm really unhappy with how things are going in terms of my pendings. Go look at what you did for the last 90 days and give yourself an honest assessment, because I can tell you 100% certainty you weren't doing business development. And had you done that for 10, 12, 15 hours a week, not per day, a week, you would not have the problem you have right now. It's not your market. There's somebody in your market that has all those pendings. There's somebody in your market that has all those actives. Because the sellers don't sit around and go, God, Kevin never called me, so I guess we'll wait and not put my house on the market. Right? But we act like this as agents. And this is in here about outsourcing and insourcing, because it's this boring, mundane activities that we give ourselves an excuse. The sister argument to this is you get desperate and you start what you see down below here, which is you get way out of bounds on buyers versus listings. This is the sort of the third leg of this excuse tree. And the third leg of the excuse tree is I've got so many building inspections and so many pendings on buyers, which is usually somewhere less than 2 or 3 or 4, especially with TRID and what we're going to go through in the fourth quarter, that the excuse is I don't even know when I would get on the phone and do any business development. I can't do it. I'm too busy. I'm spending hours doing X, Y, and Z. Again, your trading off out of desperation things that you should be doing. Those of you that have been through Listing Mastery with us know there is no model for the buy side of the business that scales. There is no model for the buy side of the business that scales. If you've chosen out of desperation to overload yourself with buyers, your business is going to suck. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. It's not going to ever work well. You will always be playing the tape in the back of your head of, God, I don't even know how I can get on the phone and get 10, 12 hours of conversation timing. You're never going to get there. And that's the whole busy is the enemy of success. I skipped over a bullet here. I'm going to come back to it now. We've talked about this under shiny objects. We've talked about this on preceding calls. This is what I call replicating garbage. It's garbage you see on social media. It's garbage that you get in a webinar or an email that is based on pure fiction. There was a conference in Dallas, and the gentleman that puts it on thinks he's a rock star, and he was talking about expireds and withdrawals, and most of you know exactly where I'm going with this. He's full of garbage. He's talking about a market condition that doesn't exist with very few exceptions. But he was able to get, because of promotion, 200 or 300 people to show up and listen to them shovel garbage all week long. Shame on the real estate industry. Don't be a consumer of garbage. And the garbage is really put out for you to basically feast on in social media. Stay out of there. Don't blindly follow models and agents, even in your market or your office or whatever you see, that don't pursue something that makes sense. There is no magic bullet or some secret sauce that all of a sudden is going to change the fact that, like the Edward Jones broker, who has hundreds and hundreds of conversations while you figure out 100 ways to not do the boring tasks, they will beat you every time. They're going to kill you and crush you. And this is a zero-sum, X number of transaction model. Your market, sellers are not going to wait for you to get your shit together. They're really not. They're going to list with somebody else. If you choose not to get in touch with more people, somebody else in your market's going to run into them with a name badge on, and you just lost $10,000. How do you think your family, your spouse, would react if they understood the truth? You're not doing your job, and you just lost $10,000. Imagine you went and bought something, and let's say hypothetically you had a gambling problem and you lost $10,000. That stuff would get fixed in a hurry. You'd have a come to Jesus conversation with your spouse and your family about, okay, we're going to get you in rehab. And a lot of people need rehab for real estate. So that's enough of what I want to talk about this from a sort of a dose of cold water. We hear the excuses all the time, especially in the fall. The market's slowing down. There's not enough opportunity. Well, guess what? You're 90 days behind on having that conversation. Well, all we can do now is move forward. I'm not trying to beat you up and say, you know what, if you're screwed around for the last 90 days and didn't know what you should do, just give up and come back in the spring. Absolutely not. Every agent and broker we've ever worked with that has either come to us, because a lot of people started in coaching in the fall, or got into a slump that would actually go back to work, has had a fantastic winter and first quarter. I can't fix your October on October 20th. I can't fix your November on October 27th. But I can certainly make things 75 to 90, 120 days from now rock. So the bad news is we've got to get back on track. The question is, are you going to do it today or when? So let's talk about the leadership and handoff and what works best. I'm going to give you the story, and you can see what it says on the screen, but I'm going to give you the story about how we struggled with something that a lot of agents are exploring, I'll call it, in terms of what they want to look at. You know, in low inventory markets, inside sales is sort of a big topic, right? You have people who are selling group coaching on this. They're like, hey, guess what? I did this, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. Yeah, we see a lot of agents struggling with this. And a lot of this comes to this topic of leadership and the direct handoff. It doesn't work any other way. It's hard to hold people accountable if you've never done the task. Because whether you think they figured it out or not, they figure it out the first day they talk to you that you're full of it. And you've never actually made these calls, especially when you try and regurgitate something you've heard or seen. Even though, for example, call rounds, geographical calling is a non-skilled based call. In other words, it's not like an expired or a withdrawn where there's a number of tactical things you need to be able to do, and the strength of your conversation, ability to handle objections, has a direct effect on your conversion. Inside sales and call rounds, even though it's a non-skilled, meaning the more people you talk to, the better results you'll have. So it's time on the task, not skills. It's this wanting to go from step one to I'm just going to hire somebody. I'm going to outsource. I'm going to just do this. I'm never going to do this. I'm going to figure out how to run this up on my credit card and not have to ever do it. We see a high coincidence of this in failure. When we did inside sales, I spent 30 hours with the inside sales team at our office. We had some people that showed up and left in the first hour. They're like, I hate this. I'm not going to ever do this.
Yes.
And they were out of sales calls. They walked. The guy you thought was the strongest player walked out in the first 20 minutes. The girl that we thought might be struggling turned out to be the best because she would just do the work, and she was like a sponge to learn how to do it. Had I not been willing to make calls in front of them to work on the intonation and some of the other things you need, that when people act like you just ask them if you can kill their kids because they have an attitude on the phone, and how you handle that and not stumble through it. If I had never made any calls, we would have had 100% turnover. Mm-hmm. But because I could demonstrate and say, look, I found 3 opportunities over a course of several weeks, we actually had great success with it. So it's this leadership on all tasks. Same thing with contract to close. Same thing with other tasks. You can't skip to the end step. Now, you may be lucky enough to find somebody in your marketplace that's an experienced agent who's now doing contract to close or some other thing from your, as we'll talk about where to find these people, and you may have an easier time of this. But if you're trying to not hold them accountable, usually what we find is it's because you wouldn't even know how to hold them accountable because you've never done these calls and refused to do them yourself. Or you haven't bought in that they'll actually work, for example, on inside sales calls. And again, you're trying to avoid the mundane tasks. There's nothing stronger than to say, okay, for the next 3 weeks, I'm going to call side by side with you to say you're committed to make this work, and you're going to back them 100%. Now, if you're outsourcing it, one of the subtle things that happens is you can call BS on their excuses for why they haven't found opportunities. Because you understand what's real and what's not real. Okay, they've been calling for 10 hours and they can't find any opportunities. You know that's not realistic because you've been calling yourself and you know how it works. Don't be that person who thinks they can buy their way out of doing the boring, mundane tasks. We've talked about human error. We've talked about this again and again and again. We're all going to make mistakes. I certainly demonstrated that in front of my inside sales team by getting, caught up in phone conversations, having people hang up on me, having people go off on me and say they're going to report me to the FTC or the Attorney General or other things. Did I do a perfect call every time? Absolutely not. Do you get better the more you do it and the more focus you have? Absolutely. Get yourself from playing the tape that says, I'm focused on perfection, no errors, and get into the reality of let's learn together. Let me help you do better at this. We're not doing brain surgery. The contract to close person who makes a mistake that has to be fixed, and maybe you got to jump in for a half an hour of time on one of 10 transactions they do for you. It's not brain surgery. Nobody is going to die. Stop acting like it's brain surgery. They even plan for human error in brain surgery and surgery. That's how they train presidents and surgical residents. We act in real estate like it's absolutely never tolerable to have this. Just remember, you're buying back at $400 a transaction, 10 or 12 hours of your time, and you're worth a lot more than that. Now, time to work or play. Some agents are addicted to their work and being busy because they're not really excited about the boring, mundane tasks because they would have to actually go do those, or they don't have any activities. They don't have any life outside of work. They're just busy. Need to get really, really clear, whether it's insourcing or outsourcing, on the fact that I got to get back to business development activities. I'm going to do business development. Business development gets done before anything else, and nothing else matters. You're going to have so much free time when you get yourself into the right spot that it might scare you. We told you the story again and again of people who are used to shadowing busy agents, and they plan on a week. They plan a lot of time. One of the ways you'll know if you ever go shadow an agent or you hear a story about shadowing an agent, and that agent is on track 100% with their business development, is the shadowing will last usually about a half a day or a day, because you're going to see nothing but business development. And what do we talk about this activity being? Boring and mundane. I mean, if you see somebody making 50, 75 contacts in a day, after you've seen the 20th or 30th contact, you see them develop some sort of a future listing opportunity or actually close for an appointment. You don't need to see it 10 more times. You get that, okay, you know what, they're doing a lot of this business development activity, I'm not. The other thing you're going to see is most of these agents and brokers that are on track have a lot of time because they have insourced or outsourced all of the other tasks. That is playtime. Whatever their activity is, they like to play golf, whatever they want to do, go see sporting events, take their family, have activities with their kids that are in sports. If your excuse and the track you play in your head is, I've got such a busy schedule with my kids, there's so many activities with the kids, I can't think about doing business development, you're still missing something. Because it's not an or, it's always an and. You'll have plenty of time. You got to, and this is the whole theme today, insourcing versus outsourcing. What are you spending your time on? What $300 transaction activity are you doing? And time off and boundaries are a critical step. We touched on this just a minute ago. So many agents never plan to take any time off. They do intermittent business development or none at all, and they just opportunistically happen to find some certain amount of business that they feel guilty because they know, like I talked about 10 minutes ago, that for the last 100 days, I really haven't been doing anything business development-wise. Mm-hmm. I don't have any pendings. I have very few active listings. And so how could I possibly think about taking a bunch of time off? Well, the reality is, for the next 100 days, you probably need to say no to everything other than critical family activities and business development. Everything else gets put aside. That's what they do with professional baseball players when they get in a slump, and let's say they're not hitting. They put them in batting practice every day, just like they would if they were back in Little League or in high school. Your batting practice is business development. It solves everything. When we were in leadership in large market centers, there was a mantra when people were off track with appointments to meet with agents that they were potentially going to recruit. And it was that recruiting calls solve everything. The same thing applies to you in real estate. Business development solves everything. My boss in Miami looked at me about 30 days into the job when I was in the leadership role and said, you're not really in the office like we would normally expect. I don't really understand what you're doing. 30 days later, he didn't ask because I recruited more people in a 30-day period than they had done in the previous 6 months. People should look at you that way. How are he and she taking so much time off and listing so many properties and having so much activity when I don't see him doing the garbage that I see replicated throughout my market and throughout my frame of reference in the real estate industry. Again, we're not looking to be like the rest of the herd. Don't emulate that way. Plan for plenty of time off and get really, really clear on what you're going to do with that time, because if you don't have a plan for it, you're not going to take it off.
Yeah. Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Most of our clients are succeeding at a level that's almost incomprehensible at some of our national brands. They're working 25 hours a week. They're carrying, for one particular client, an average of 5 active listings, 5 pendings, 5 coming soons, and 4 or 5 closings. And that's their goal, rolling 5s. And they work 25 hours a week. And they schedule time off for at least like a 4-day weekend every quarter. It gets on the schedule and they commit to it. So they also stay out of the mundane things, the marketing, for instance. They stay out of contract to close issues unless the house is on fire. They also stay out of, and I want to tie this down because we are about Pura Vida in all things. That we had a client in St. Louis. He's in the top 50 now out of 8,000. And one weekend he was supposed to go on listing appointments or do lead generation and lead follow-up on Saturday mornings because that's when we say to do it. Well, I didn't get to it this weekend, Stevie, because I was putting up a fence in my backyard and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, how much are you worth an hour? Because you hang out with us, $300 an hour. How long did it take you to put the fence up? Whatever, 12 hours. Why are you doing that? Do you love putting fences up? So when we talk about outsourcing people, we're not just talking about outsourcing specific tasks that are relative to our business. We're talking about, do you really enjoy mowing your yard? Yes or no? No. Well, hire somebody to mow your yard. My youngest son, is a certified financial planner and a CPA. He makes a really, really, really good living. And he used to, how many times have we gone to St. Louis and either seen my kid, who's in his 30s, mowing the yard or power washing the house? And he listens to us over time. And he's like, Mom, you're going to be so proud of me. I hired somebody to take care of the lawn. I hired somebody to power wash the house. We hired a housekeeper for Emily and I so we can spend more time with the baby. We hired blah, blah, blah. He's hiring, he's outsourcing other things other than, there's nothing he can outsource on a business level, but he can certainly outsource mowing the lawn. He can certainly outsource planting trees. He can certainly, get my point, people? It's not just about the business tasks. What other things, why are you painting the kitchen? Do you love to paint? No, but my wife wanted the kitchen painted. Well, then hire a painter. You should know a painter anyway. You sell houses. Well, why are you blah, blah, blah? Go ahead.
But here's the challenge. It's the chicken and egg problem. And I want to make sure I keep on, because we got to talk about this business development series that you want to launch between now and the end of the year.
Okay.
Anything other than business development are all distractions, right? In other words, you need to do this. Here's the cold water that's coming back again. Here's the reality. If you've been screwing off for 100 days and you've committed to your spouse that you're going to fix the fence or paint it, you're probably in trouble, right? Because you're probably thinking, well, I don't have money to do that.
Right.
We can't fix it for 100 days, but from an instant gratification standpoint, start saying no to some things. Start changing the timing on what you're doing and get to work for the next 100, 120 days so you can outsource things. In the case of Stephanie's son, he makes plenty of money. He's got a set of leaders and boss that keep him accountable, right? He can't not meet with clients and not have phone conversations. Hell, he even flies across the country to go meet with some of their bigger clients. Yeah. He does business development. That's all he does, other than research and product stuff. The same way we teach you to learn your market and products, he does. But the difference is, and this is the curse of real estate, there is no one that says, you really didn't do anything for the last 100 days. Because in the business world, outside of real estate, you'd be fired. So here's the deal. You've got to work. You got to get back to work. If you're, as we described, less than pleased with your pipeline, number of listings, pendings, and feel like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Well, the answer is business development, more business development, and more business development, and everything else gets on the back burner. Figure out how to get back on track. It's like the batting practice. You got to start going back to work. Doesn't mean you don't start your search for outsourcing, right? This is an outsourcing, insourcing discussion. If you know you've got to get contract to close off and you aren't ready to do it yet, and you know in your business model, for example, insourcing, you want to hire a key single hire, work with your coach if you're in coaching with us, or get information on how to do this, but get your network spun up, get a description written, get a hiring, whether it's a contractor or a direct hire inside, and go through the process of building your pipeline, just like I described in the recruiting world, of people you're in conversation with. It's not going to happen overnight. And this just gets you out of the cycle of, I'm going to hire somebody, it's going to be a panacea, you know, they're doing inside sales, and now 100 days later, because I've never done the calls, I didn't do any calls with them, I don't even know how to hold them accountable, and we didn't get any results. Unfortunately, there are a lot more of those stories than the opposite, which is, I know I want to have somebody in by February. I'm going to talk to my allied resources, title, mortgage, other real estate players. I'm going to get the word out that I'm looking for somebody like this because I'm going to hire 2 people by February. If you do your job for the next 120 days, you'll have plenty of cash flow to do the hiring, especially if you've done a good job with your plan. But use your network and get your search started now. There's no, oh my God, I've got so many pendings, I need to figure out something for a contract to close, which is something that we see when agents get off track, right? They're having all this success, then all of a sudden they're like, God, I got to find somebody. It's like a Band-Aid now, right? I've got to cut. I got to apply something to do this. When we see that happen, we see people cut corners. They'll hire a contract to close person they know is not right. They'll outsource to a contractor that in their gut they know it's not right instead of starting their search now. So despite the fact that we're talking about why so many people struggle with this insourcing and outsourcing, you need to be doing in parallel a search. You need to be clear on what you're doing. And if you're working with us in coaching, we can help you get really clear on what your candidate will look like and how do you vet and pick the right person. And your network is going to give you better candidates than you will randomly looking around out there. If you're at a loss for how to manage this process, we can certainly help you. Use your network. So in-house versus out, this is such a specific decision for each agent, their personality, skills, the way their business operates, that there's no right answer. We did a combination of in-house and contracting. Some of the contracting roles were so specialized that we've seen plenty of teams bring it in-house, but we didn't want to deal with the payroll issues. We didn't want to deal with the hassles. And quite frankly, we could find better people that were not willing to work as an employee that would be better going will work as a contractor. So you've got to figure out. You may end up with a mix. You may end up with just a single employee. You may end up with a couple of contractors. Whatever's going to keep you away from business development either needs to be outsourced, stopped, set aside. It's the whole instant gratification versus later. You may have to say no to a lot of things, especially if you've been off track for 100 days and you've been playing that tape of, no problem, I've got this. And now you look up and you're not happy with where you're at. You actually own the business development for your business. There is no consistent model that you show people out there that just magically things rain and they have consistent business that's profitable. I'm certainly not saying that there aren't examples of people that have figured out how to get cash flow and they run like a low margin home shopping network. They're advertising, they're buying $50,000 endorsements, and they're doing all sorts of things to buy opportunities. If you look at their P&Ls, they're doing a tremendous amount of volume. Don't get confused with volume. They're also on razor-thin profitability. You make more in 10 transactions than they would make in 100. You make more in 10 transactions than they make in 100. That's why they sometimes are doing 400, 500, 600 transactions. Remember, I have direct perspective on this. I've worked for a team like that. What happens when the market shifts and their burn rate, like the agent that we know in Texas, had 29 buyer specialists, was advertising on TV, and he was burning through hundreds of thousands of dollars per month? He went out of business. The whole thing imploded. So business development is something that you own if you want to consistently be profitable. We'll get through the next couple things, and I know Steph wants to talk about the business development piece. I'll go through these fairly quick because we've talked about this. Emulating successful practices around business development are key. We've beat this one up hard today. Don't emulate bad practices. Shut off all the distractions. This probably means that you have to say, I'm going to make a list of things that I'm interested in, but for the next 100, 120 days, I'm going to do things that work. I'm going to have more conversations. I'm going to meet with more people. I'm going to talk to my sharks. I'm going to get into my database and figure it out, especially social media. Here's the challenge. As the market slows down in the fall for these people, these tech evangelists and all these other people in the ecosystem that suck money and distract agents are out in mass on social media. Don't let yourself fall into the task of getting distracted. It's especially problematic in the fall and the winter. Think about billable hours. Be honest with you. Do an assessment of what you've done for the last 100, 120 days. Pretend like you got a review with your boss. It's a quarterly review. And they're going to ask you about the last 90 days. How much time, how many billable hours of business development do you have? For some of you, this might scare the hell out of you. You might be like, I didn't do more than X. For others, we know what the answer is. It's going to be in the hundreds of hours. I'm going to repeat that again. The top performers are going to give an answer for the last 90 or 120 days of hundreds of hours of billable time. And they get paid appropriately. And their fourth quarter looks very different than people that have virtually no billable hours. The chicken and egg problem, there's no single solution. Figure out insource versus outsource. Don't get hung up on that. The right answer, if you go out and you spin up your network like we talked about, will be clear for you. Don't decide that you're not going to do it or do it based on the fact that you've got money now versus later and just keep doing the same thing. So, Steph, I know you've got some conversations. I'm going to get through this one slide on business development. Before we get into that, did you have anything you wanted to wrap up on the other item?
Nope.
Okay. So business development, I'm going to have Steph talk about the calls and sort of the business planning intensive that she plans between now and the end of the year. There's some preparation homework. We've got a whole call coming up in a couple of weeks on business planning, and that'll be separate from what Steph's going to talk about today. But we want you to take a look at your 2015 business plan. In other words, what did you indicate that you were planning on doing this year? It may be something that you did fourth quarter last year and you haven't seen it since then, hopefully not. And then look at your actual execution. What is it that you've been able to accomplish? What is it that you've done actually versus your plan? Take a look at sources, take a look at units, take a look at wins and losses. Be really candid. Because it's not important to say, God, this year has been more off track than on track. For you to just identify that and identify the why allows you to fix it. That's why they put Major League Baseball players that are in a slump in batting practice, because it makes it really, really apparent to the coaching staff what happened. What are they doing? Is it mental? Is it skills? Is it a combination? Sometimes it's the same thing with us when we do these business plan reviews. Now, market conditions, we want you to prepare. Some of you are doing the total market overviews. If you're not, you need to do some sort of a market snapshot about your market so we can take a look at during business planning what areas should you be targeting, are there price ranges you should stay out of. Things shift over time. right? Just because you looked at that a long time ago doesn't mean that it's still the same as it was before. For a lot of you, as I said, this should be easy because you're already doing a total market overview. And this is what allows a coach or us in the process to give you some guidance. Because as much as we like to work certain areas or price points, sometimes it doesn't make sense. It's just going to be too hard to get done what you need to get done. There's an easy way and a tough way to do it. We don't want you doing business development into a 100-mile-an-hour headwind because of market conditions. So billable hours, we've talked about that. The whole figure out how much you've done and versus what you plan on doing, and then we're going to take a look at for 2016, how do we get people on track. If we can fix one thing with you and you start thinking about billable hours and you'll actually do your billable hours work for business development, the rest of it all falls into place. It's literally that simple. Now, we have a thriving coaching practice because if it were that easy and we just told you to do that and everybody did it, it's the rest of the world that happens around people on a weekly basis that we have to keep people back on track. New sets of problems and challenges come up when you have a lot of success. Because if you do 100 days of intensive billable hours business development, you're going to have a different challenge, which is your business is going to be absolutely booming, and we got to help you work through the process so you still have a life. The last one, we want you to get clear on if you're going to really get this on track and do 25 hours a week instead of 60. What are you going to do with your free time? What's your why? Why are you looking to do what you're doing in your business? Stephanie made a comment earlier about if you're unwilling to do your business, maybe you should go find something else to do. This why and your big why and why you do what you do is a critical part of this. We see this again and again with clients where they're not clear in the least about why they're even in the real estate business or the mortgage business or oil and gas or whatever it is they do. They're going through the motions. For some people, they figured out how to game the system, have their family think that they're working, and make a decent amount of money. And in some cases, they don't even have to make a lot of money because maybe the spouse makes a ton of money. And so get really clear on why you're doing what you're doing. It affects people more significantly. So, Steph, you got a business planning intensive in addition to the week call we're going to do a couple weeks from now. Do you want to run through this with them, give a little bit of perspective on what your reasoning is for this, and then we'll wrap up and see if anybody's got any questions before we go today.
No, just for those of you that are in a client relationship with us and we represent your board of directors, your board of advisors for you, for your team, is that going back to keep, I think it really goes to, I'm gonna tie this up for you in a really nice bow. Figure out for me and Kevin how much you are worth an hour. I've had some of you say, well, I'm working 60 hours a week and I'm making $300,000-$400,000 a year, but I got nothing right now in the pipeline because I stopped working 100 days ago. Honestly, figure out, based on your GCI this year, gross commissions earned, figure out how many hours you worked and how much you're worth. Because if you're coming in under 300, you're doing it wrong. Kevin, I really want to tie this down with what you said time and time again through this as far as looking at yourself like you're an attorney. If you're not making $300 an hour because you're working 20, 25 hours a week, 10 of that is mostly business development because that's the only thing that matters, and figure out what you're worth per hour. Just look at your GCI. Figure out how much time you say you're working, whatever story you're telling yourself. And if you're coming in under 300, yeah, we need to help you. But it goes back to everything we've always said. Be the market expert, not the marketing expert. Know what you should be doing every week, and it's 10 hours of business development. Period. No excuses. And know your why. And Kevin had this in the previous page, and we're just kind of reiterating the same thing he said before. Know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, and we can't measure your performance unless you know your numbers, because you're supposed to share them with your board of directors and your board of advisors. So my challenge to you as far as homework today, start thinking about each and every one of you that's on this call now or listening later. What am I really worth per hour? This is the questions. Am I doing 10 hours of business development every week? Yes or no? How much money have I earned year to date? and break that into that, whatever that number is in your head, 20 hours, 30 hours. Some people say I work 60 hours a week. I'm going to call bullshit on that. And divide your GCI based on the number of hours a week that you're telling yourself. And if you're not coming in at 300, we got some work to do. What we can't measure or what you don't measure, we can't help you with. You have to measure your return on investment, period. And it goes down to, what does that equal? Billable hours. Start thinking like a lawyer.
So let me ask you a question. On the last slide here, they're going to receive some information from you, especially if they're in coaching with us, about this series of 3 or 4 business planning related coaching calls. It's like a coaching intensive on business planning. This is a genesis, isn't it, that we see agents getting off track in the fourth quarter, losing momentum, and then not doing what they need to do from a business planning. So what this slide is outlining is some information you're going to be sending out specifically about these calls. When would they expect to see that information if they're interested?
So today is Tuesday. So what we've done, guys, is because we've got several of you and 2 of us, and we typically do 1 call a week, is we're going to launch a specific one-on-one session with each and every one of you. We're going to ask you to please join us to taking business development for 2016 seriously. We're going to take you to the next level. So you'll be getting something from me, inviting you to additional 2 calls a month with Kevin and I through November. It's a short series, November and December. We're going to work on business planning, and you're going to be honest with me, and we're going to be honest with you. So what we're actually inviting you to, the reason for this PowerPoint is we're launching something specifically for our business clients, for the people that were on their board of directors, a series of calls that we want to get you into for the next 60 days where it's only going to be specific about business planning. Every week we talk about something different, of course, because we're not like those coaches that say the same thing every week. But the reason this is here is you will hear from me by Friday what's involved in the business planning clinic, one-on-one, board of directors, board of advisors role between you and Kevin and I. So we're coming to get you. We're coming to help you. We're going to have our 1 weekly coaching call, but we're going to have 2 extra calls November and December for those of you who are with us now. Come heck or high water. We're here to make it happen for you. So thank you for tying that down for me, dear.
Okay. I don't have any. I'm just going to look real quick here and make sure we don't have any.
I think we covered everything.
Okay. Yeah, we got through everything. This will be out and up on the playlist for replay probably no later than tomorrow night.
Yep.
We'll get it processed and ready to go. If you have questions about this, or you take a look at this and you're like, holy cow, I'm way off track, during your weekly call, if you're in coaching with us, raise your hand. There's no shame in saying, hey, look, I've been screwing off for 100 days and I'm way off track.
Yep.
People pay us a lot of money so we can help you. We can't help you. It's kind of like somebody having chest pain, going to the doctor and saying, I'm fine. We're not going to the doctor. This is just like that. If you've got massive chest pain because you haven't been working for 100 days, just raise your hand this week and say, yep, I'm so far off track. If you were me, help me figure out what to do to get back on track. Because the good news is, yep, and I want to end on a high note, you can fix this. I can tell you we did. I'm going to close with a story. The first 90 or 100 days in St. Louis, we arrived there Memorial Day weekend in 2006. I just found out I had melanoma, I had cancer. We had to push about every distraction I could have. Had surgery. We messed around and did all sorts of stuff and burnt through a lot of money. Mm-hmm. But after about 100 days, virtually nothing going on, I got to work. We ended the fall of 2006 with 36 closed transactions. So don't ever tell yourself, oh, you know what, I screwed up. I didn't work for 100 days. And I'm going to give myself a pass because I'll just worry about it next year.
It's never too late. Yeah, it's never too late.
Nope. So I want to end up on a high note just because we've been there. We speak from experience. We've done it too, where you wake up and go, I remember the conversation with Stevie. She said to me, we've burnt through so much money that if you don't get your act together and get us some business, we're going to be in serious trouble here. And I got to work. And 90 days later, we had 36 closed transactions. I was doing a hell of a lot more than 10 hours business development per week. But I can tell you, you can get on track. So with that, we'll end for the week. We'll have this call up, and you'll get an email from us once it's up in the playlist. And let us know if you have any questions.
Okay. Peace and love, guys. Talk to you soon.